Covering this mod is a little bit different, since I feel like unlike many other mods I cover or play on this channel, in some ways this mod does a better job of selling itself just through raw gameplay. Compared to many other mods that you really need to kind of break down or explain what's going on. In this video, we're going to be talking about Grim. This is a DLC-sized, or I would even argue expansion-sized, new mod for Fallout 4, bringing a lot to the table. To just kind of briefly discuss what this adds in, it brings in new NPCs, new creatures, new weapons, new armors, new game mechanics, new fundamental features to the game, and of course, new quests to tie it all together. I've been talking about this mod quite a bit over the past few months on this channel, giving you teasers of it here and there as they were shared, and well, it is finally here for some of us to play. As of right now, it doesn't have a full-on wide release. This is not a fully complete build of the mod, but rather it is an early access build that you can find on the mod author's Discord, which of course I will have linked down below. But do keep that in mind as you're watching this video. There are further and future updates. New content and more bug fixes are coming to this, meaning that hopefully it will make a full Nexus debut over the next few weeks, but separately there also are plans to bring this to Xbox One after a few more feature updates are added. So if you want the early access build and you want to play it right now, it is available. If you want to wait a little bit, it'll also be available even wider soon. So one of the really interesting and cool parts about Grim as it exists right now is it is effectively a comprehensive horror overhaul for Fallout 4. The base game still is there. This is without a doubt an expansion building on top of what already exists, but it's adding in quite a bit on top of what already exists. But to break down this mod, there's a few fundamental aspects to it, and the first of which, that is the most obvious of course, will be the visual changes this can bring to Fallout 4. Right off the bat, it'll give Fallout 4 a much darker and more grim outlook. Things just seem a bit more bleak, and there's actually several ways you could tweak and change this in-game. Part of this are some visual changes very similar to how it works in Natural and Atmospheric Commonwealth. Other aspects of this are from the ENB component that you can install. So speaking broadly, you could give Fallout 4 a different visual look. There are several different presets to choose from in this category. Several of these are inspired by other horror movies or video games, so some will definitely look familiar. Although, outside of just some of those initial presets and some of the obvious, there also is a bit more tweaking or more custom features that are added. A couple of cool things you could toy with are things like adding depth of field or having that off, how much noise or screen distortion there will be, as well as if you want that vignette or don't want the vignette. One of the coolest of these is you could actually have kind of an old school VHS overlay. You could tweak this to have it only be subtle and slight from time to time, or to be pretty clear, like you actually are watching an old school film. Very horror movie-esque. And you could also really play around with the colors with this one, how vibrant and bright you want the colors to be, or alternatively if you want a more bleak world. But again, as I mentioned before, all of this is highly customizable, although even outside of just the overall world visual changes, it also will bring some changes to interior lighting, as this does have its own separate interior lighting mod. Overall, it'll make it so some of those interiors will be a bit darker. It makes it feel as if some of those interior light sources are true light sources, and with this feature you could also turn it on and off or have a cold or warm setting, depending on which tint you want the lights to have overall. And frankly, that's just some of the more obvious visual changes. There's also some changes to gore and blood effects in game, so you will also notice that, and even other things like new weathers, which also will now be added in game. That includes things like seriously dark nights. I'm not using a third-party mod for this. A lot of the stuff you're seeing in the background is just built-in features to this one. It really is pretty comprehensive. Although some of you have heard already, the visual aspects are really only one half of this. As in almost every instance of there being a visual change, there also is an auditory change to go along with it. Grim is going to do a lot with the sounds of Fallout 4. Outside of just the new and custom sounds for creatures or effects, there will also be a fully fledged soundtrack with this one that will have variations depending on the time of day it is, what kind of weather is currently playing, but also just what event is happening. If you're in combat, if somebody's sneaking up on you, if you're in the cursed world, which we'll talk about more in a moment, I'll give you a listen to some of the clips of some of these various things, but it sounds awesome and definitely gets you in the horror theme of things. So those are incredible, and I would say one of the best parts of this is how well integrated it is with some of the visual tics that also come with this mod. When you see something scary, you notice a storm or drastic change in weather, there's almost always an audio cue that goes right with it. You're not just seeing a change, you're also hearing one, and that culmination and how well it's done is what I think makes this one of the most powerful mods as far as just making you feel a certain way. And this is even down to some of the little things, like when you enter into vats, there'll now be a new sound, or even when you discover a new location, that becomes a bit of a more impactful experience. But again, for this aspect of the mod, I think it's less about me saying it. There's not really so much for me to describe as much as just for you to either watch it or download this and experience it for yourself. This is masterfully done and without a doubt one of my favorite aspects of it. I feel like it's a real testament to the size and how impactful this mod is, considering we've already made it this far in the video and haven't even really talked about anything all that new or custom. A lot of what I discussed already, other mods have tackled, but where this mod really goes to the next level is some of the new NPCs, features, and mechanics it brings into Fallout 4. This aspect of Grim is mostly optional. If you just want the first half of this video, you could have all of that while almost never experiencing some of the new features or mechanics. But if you do want these new features, which I think you should, the way you're going to do this is by actually starting the curse. After installing Grim, it will add a new menu item to your inventory. This will give you the functionality to start this part of the game, as well as customize some of the other things I talked about already. In effect, what's happening here from a lore perspective is you are getting cursed by some mysterious disease. There's some quests you will have to do in order to get rid of this curse, but also you'll be able to find out a lot more backstory around it, but immediately you'll notice that new creatures will begin spawning, as well as you'll have this mysterious new companion character, who is actually ridiculously powerful at times. But it's not a typical companion that is solely on your side. She actually has a weird dynamic that I don't want to spoil, but again, if you do the quest with this one, you'll find out more around this backstory. Following this, and just with this mod overall, as you explore throughout Fallout 4, you will start to notice that new and odd creatures begin to spawn. Some of these are the typical or generic scary creatures that you know and love from popular culture, things like zombies and skeleton enemies you'll find all throughout the Commonwealth, and almost view them as an alternate to ghouls, of course featuring some different characteristics. In this video, I am definitely not giving a comprehensive list of the creatures, partly because there is just so many freaking creatures added in with this, and if you want to start seeing some of those creatures, just wait until day turns to night. And then as you're afflicted with this curse, you'll start to see some pretty crazy things happen in Fallout 4's Commonwealth, and a lot of horrifying creatures come out of the darkness. The way this works is, if you stick to some of the major roads, you are mostly okay. You might see creatures off in the distance, but that definitely is the safer path. Alternatively, if you just start running through some of the forests or fields of Fallout 4, you will encounter a lot of scary things. And unlike certain other creature mods that already exist for Fallout 4, it's not like these are all run-of-the-mill raider or ghoul retextures. Some of these new creatures are unique and substantial. When you encounter them, you'll know, partly because you get an on-screen notification, but also because they have a very unique interaction or effect in game. Just the overall darkness, the images, as well as the music to go along with it make Fallout 4's nighttimes now a horrifying experience that you really have to be wary of. But also, it is some of the most fun I've had in this game in a very, very long time. Although separate from this, there also is the curse component. Over time, if you let the curse persist on your character, you'll begin to notice some horrific and changing things in game. At certain times, you'll have hallucinations, so enemies will approach you, but they won't actually be real. Sometimes there will be genuine enemies attacking you while also hallucination enemies being there. Also, you might notice some shaky screen effect, heavy breathing from your character. These symptoms or byproducts will take some in-game time to start to develop and progress, and it does seem to get progressively worse as time does go on. And this is where the quests of Grimm start to play a role. One of the main quests you're going to have is finding out the solution or the cure to the curse as you have it, and along the way you will get a bit of a backstory as to where exactly this curse came from. Something this mod does that I think people either love or hate, but I think from a gameplay perspective actually meshes really well with the rest of the mod, is that there are no quest markers, or really even clear-cut, hey, go here. Rather, for many of the aspects of this mod, on your way to find the cure, you're going to have to get hints. Starting off, you're going to get a hint that is just 4 words, and you'll have to connect the dots of where these 4 words lead you. You have to think about this. It'll somewhat be a trial and error process, leading you to wandering around in this now pretty terrifying world, but I wouldn't describe it as ridiculously difficult, and after some effort you definitely can figure it out. And the quests with this one aren't super long or lengthy, but rather they take some time to actually complete because you are thinking or spending time traveling. The cure is one of the main quests from this one, but there's some other side quests that add in other NPCs or interesting things for you to find. And for that whole part of the mod, it doesn't feel like the real focus. More of the focus is you thinking about it while experiencing the changes it brings to this world, but it gives you something to do or work towards overall, as well as sometimes giving you some pretty cool items. Which, speaking of, this mod also adds in a ton in that category too. There's a variety of new weapons added in with this, some of these being pretty custom and new and unique to Fallout 4, others different modifications on existing weapons or weapon mods. There's also many items, and all of this ties together to actually give you some advantage or recourse against these otherworldly creatures. It'll give you bonus effects or better damage against some of these creatures, or alternatively for some of them, the only way you could damage the new creature is by using these items. And there's also going to be a wide variety of new apparel items added in with this. For pretty much all of this, it's added in pretty naturally. You'll sometimes find it as a quest reward or just by taking down an enemy. It's definitely not the main focus or main part of this mod, but it really makes it feel a lot more fleshed out and thought out. These are handy items that you're not just going to pick up and forget about. You're going to want to start using them because, especially on survival, the fights can be quite hard and, well, terrifying. But also some of the items actually are pretty unique or different, which is nice. But then last but not least, what is easily to me one of the most terrifying but most interesting aspects of this mod is the otherworld/hell. So after being cursed at certain times while playing the game, you will suddenly be dragged into hell, which is a totally different Fallout 4 Commonwealth. Now in reality, of course, this is very, very similar to the typical Commonwealth, although the inhabitants of it are going to be quite a bit different. Like Fallout 76, gone are the human NPCs, and rather now you're going to encounter a ton of new and horrific creatures. Some of these are existing things you've seen in the regular Commonwealth, but some of these are different and almost amped up versions of some of the typical and scary creatures you could find. Basically, while you're in this world, what you're going to have to do is run to a tree of life, and you can open the door on that tree, which will return you to the Commonwealth. But also, it's basically horde mode. After going into this world, you are going to have a lot of people chasing you, and a lot of those things are very, very scary. This is one of my favorite parts of the mod, as the fear factor is really turned up to 11. It also is where you see some of the craziest and most interesting of these creatures, and as long as you're cursed, there's no real control over this. You can of course configure it with the config file how often it does happen, but sometimes you'll just be walking and you'll be dragged in unexpectedly, meaning you can be not that well prepared, making it all the more scary, but also a really cool and fun mechanic that showcases how awesome this mod is. And frankly, that's all I really want to tell you about this one. This mod is massive. I've gone over some of the major features, I think hitting all of the major strokes of what it adds in, but there's a lot more, and I think one of the beautiful aspects of this one is it's a really fun mod to just download and experience. You don't have to mess around with your load order, you don't need to have a ton of other mods, you need this and a new Fallout 4 save, or technically you don't even really, but I think the best way to experience it is a new save, and you're going to have a pretty good and scary time. Although, as I mentioned before, do remember that this is still an early access build. It's not really intended for super wide release yet. As such, as you're playing, if you encounter a bug, make sure to report it so that can get solved before we do see a Nexus or Bethesda.net launch. But for me at least, this is easily the best scary or horror mod to ever come to Fallout 4, and really it's probably in my top 5 mods to ever come to Fallout 4 full stop. It is a truly awesome experience and a real game-changing mod, and does all of this without actually ruining the base game. There are other mods like Frost that do totally transform things, but with Grim you could really go back and forth, play some of vanilla Fallout 4, do some of the quests or deal with the curse, and have that constant dynamic going back and forth, which I think is really well done here. So either way, that is my fairly long video on Grim, a really great one and one that you should be paying attention to. This will without a doubt not be the last time I talk about this mod, and I'm very excited to go finish this video and actually play some more of it. But with that, as always again, I thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.